There's a couple of things going on with a woman that runs Harvard. And one of them is, hey, I have to have a room with color crayons and comic books so you can read a comic book and then, color a happy tree because you feel like you're being, you have microaggressions all around you. Stopping free speech everywhere, unless you're calling for, the death of Jews. Then I guess, hey, free speech. It's crazy. But there's something else that has now been brought up that I think people knew about in the Harvard world, but didn't say anything. And that is the fact that its president, Claudine Gay, broke Harvard's own code of conduct on plagiarism. And it's a pretty significant amount of plagiarism, including her doctoral dissertation was plagiarized. Parts of it were wholly plagiarized, and she never credited anybody. Now, here's why this matters. You plagiarize something, I don't really care. You plagiarize something in a book and claim it's yours, okay, I care, because that's stealing from somebody else. You plagiarize in a university. Well, you're setting the standards and trying to hold those standards of academic excellence and honesty. And if the person who's at the top is known to have plagiarized, how do you tell the students we're going to kick you out? This has nothing to do with her testimony, but it has everything to do with how corrupt our universities are, how morally corrupt they are. We have Aaron Sabarium on with us now. He wrote a great piece for the Washington Free Beacon, and we wanted to talk to him about this. You went to Yale, and you were the editor of the Yale Daily News, so you know something about Ivy League and plagiarism. Not really celebrated, is it?
No, Glenn, it is not.
Yeah.
It is not celebrated, and in fact, I would say that generally at all of these schools, it's standard to get a lecture saying it doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter if it's intentional, if it's unintentional, even if you do it with the best intentions, it's still a serious problem. You should double check your work to make sure absolutely nothing is plagiarized. That is what Harvard tells its students in a very long document that outlines its policies very clearly. It no fewer than 5 times indicates that intent is irrelevant. If you take any language or even just ideas or content from someone else and don't cite them, it's plagiarism. And according to the letter of the Harvard plagiarism policies, Gay clearly violated them on at least some occasions.
Yeah, and significant. I mean, you in your article go through it. We don't have to go through it here, but it's significant. Why does this matter?
Well, look, if people do make mistakes, and if this was what we found out of a corpus of, say, 100 or 200 peer-reviewed papers, one of which had won a Nobel Prize, you might think, okay, it's a few paragraphs here or there, but the overall content's original. Is this such a big deal? I think it's worth emphasizing that she has published in total 11 peer-reviewed articles, 11 in the past 2 decades. That is a really, really small number for any academic, I think, at a prestigious university, but especially for the academic that the university chooses to elevate to its highest position. So you're not talking about a few instances of maybe careless citations or plagiarism out of 100 papers. You're talking about it out of 11 papers, right? So we found, so there have been, 11 peer-reviewed articles. In 2 of them, we found examples of plagiarism, then in her dissertation, then in another thing she wrote that was in a non-peer-reviewed journal. So this starts to amount to a pretty substantial percentage of her academic output that contains at least some plagiarized material. So as a percentage thing, I think that's actually the best way to look at it. It's not just a couple mistakes here or there. It seems to be a pattern, and it's a pattern that is fairly consistent throughout 2 decades of relatively meager scholarly output.
So this is not anything new. I mean, it's my understanding that this has kind of been known and kicked around for a while, but just kept quiet. It didn't matter. Is that true?
Well, yeah, it appears to be true because just last night, the New York Post reported that they had many of these examples and confronted Harvard with them all the way back in October. And Harvard claimed, oh, we addressed it promptly as soon as it was brought to our attention. We initiated a review of Gay's work, and Dr. Gay requested corrections proactively. Well, what the Harvard Corporation didn't mention is that apparently they intimidated, may have even threatened to sue the New York Post for defamation after the New York Post reached out for comment. So Harvard apparently took this seriously enough that they thought it was worth hiring the best defamation law firm in the country, Clare Locke, God knows how much they were paying them, to send a 15-page intimidation letter to journalists who are coming to them with examples of plagiarism. So clearly they thought that it was worth pulling out the big bucks, shelling out a lot of money to shut this down. And that was all the way back in October.
So why would they do this? To protect? I mean, why?
I think that Claudine Gay is emblematic of the kind of DEI ideology that is regnant at Harvard. Some people have focused on her race and gender, and I'm sure they don't want the optics of firing Harvard's first Black president. Yeah, of course. But I actually think it's more than that. It's that she both kind of represents the ideology they already subscribe to, and they don't want the ideology discredited. And also, this I think hasn't gotten as much attention. She was a very shrewd political operator before she became president. She was sort of at the center of a lot of cancellations, right? She helped engineer the bureaucratic defenestration of both Roland Fryer, who's this really famous Black economist at Harvard, and she helped also strip Ronald Sullivan, Harvard law professor, from an administrative post after Sullivan made the decision to serve on Harvey Weinstein's defense team. You can't defend the unpopular. That's no longer allowed. So she, I think kind of had a pattern of rewarding friends and punishing enemies, and seems to have kind of maneuvered the administration and bureaucratic apparatus of Harvard around her very shrewdly. That's part of how she became president. And I think that background may be part of why they're so unwilling to let her go. The whole kind of institution has in some sense been mobilized around her, and she's kind of put all the pieces in place.
Does it play any role that her first cousin is Roxane Gay, who is a feminist author and New York Times writer who's absolutely a terrible human being?
Honestly, I don't know if that really. I think they would do this with just about anyone in her position. Anyone in her position, anyone with her ideology. I mean, and I would say too, right? They've obviously been under pressure from donors, but they're also under pressure from their own faculty and students. And you mentioned the testimony she gave, where she couldn't forthrightly condemn calls for the genocide of Jews. I think part of the issue is that she couldn't really go up there and say, yeah, we support free speech in all cases. And in fact, yes, even if you want to call for the genocide of insert other group, we will protect that because we're so principled. A, because it wouldn't be true, and we all know it's not true. But B, because if she had said that, student activists would have tried to burn her house down. Right. So she's, to be fair to her, she is kind of in a rock and a hard place. And no matter what she does or what Harvard does, some constituency is going to throw a fit.
Well, I have to tell you, I don't want to see harm come to anybody, but, gee, if you get nailed by your own policies and your life is tough because you shoveled this poison and now that poison is coming back to haunt you, I have a hard time, again, with nobody being hurt. I have a really hard time, giving any sympathy to her at all. Thank you so much. One last question. Is this an issue outside of her? Should this be an issue outside of her testimony? In other words, is this just being brought up because there's a mob on the other side that is saying, hey, she should be fired for this? Is this a real issue beyond the anti-Semitism stuff?
Obviously, the anti-Semitism stuff increased scrutiny on her. I mean, it'd be silly to deny that, but I think it would still be an issue. The plagiarism isn't quite as severe as, say, it's not like data fraud, right? There's the guy at Stanford, actually, former Stanford president, stepped down amid allegations of data fraud. I mean, that was really serious, right? On its own terms. I think this would be a scandal on its own. The anti-Semitism stuff obviously amplifies it, makes it worse. But I think the real context here is the meager scholarly record, right? If I really don't think people would care. I wouldn't care all that much if we had found this and it was in the context of like 200 brilliant peer-reviewed papers. But that's not the context. And I think that what it underscores is that this woman clearly was not chosen for her scholarly merit. If that was the criterion, they had a lot of other candidates at Harvard that would have been better.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your work and all your writing. God bless.
Thank you.